Alright, here's part 2 of my Spider-Man movie retrospective. Today we'll be talking about the Amazing Spider-Man series, so let's start with the first movie in the series. The Amazing Spider-Man is so good. I only had a few minor issues with it, but they were mostly nitpicks, and I think the movie gets way too much hate. And sure, I have a lot of nostalgia for this one for various reasons, but I still really enjoy it regardless. Alright, so let's start with the good stuff. This movie is amazing. Pun not intended, but it works. The chemistry between Peter and Gwen is amazing, thanks to Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone's acting. In almost all of the scenes with them together, the love they felt was infectious, and Peter's argument with Captain Stacy was amazingly executed in that scene. The movie really takes time building up most of the characters, and story beats really well done. For the most part, Peter doesn't get the suit until almost halfway through, and the lizard doesn't show up until over an hour in, and Peter doesn't really become the true Spider-Man that he's meant to be until over halfway through the movie at that amazing scene at the bridge. Just gonna go off on the scene at the bridge for a wee second because that scene is amazing. The scene at the bridge is my favourite scene in any Spider-Man movie ever. One of them. Peter is faced with a choice. Stop the lizard getting away, or save a little boy. He chooses to save the boy. This is the moment that Peter realizes the suit can be more than a disguise to the people he's hurting. It can be a symbol of hope for the people he's helping. Whenever he throws the boy or the mask and says, "Put it on, it'll make you strong," he now knows that Spider-Man can mean so much more, not only to him, but to the people he needs to protect. When Peter saves the boy, he delivers him to his dad. Peter sees himself in the boy. He realizes he just stopped another boy from losing his dad like he did all those years ago. And when the dad asks who Peter really is, he says,
"Who are you?" "Spider-Man."
Peter has finally earned that title. He is Spider-Man. I really like the supporting cast of this movie. Emma Stone was great, and Dennis Leary's Captain Stacy was a really interesting character. His arc of coming around with Spider-Man and Peter Parker was excellent. Aunt May feels like a real person and a caring mother to Peter in this, and I loved how Uncle Ben's death was more directly Peter's fault than in Raimi's classic. In this, the robber only had a chance to steal the money at the perfect time because of Peter. Peter could have stopped him, but he didn't, and Uncle Ben is only out there looking for Peter, and all of the acting in this movie is incredible. The suit's a pretty controversial aspect of the film, but I've had countless debates with my friends about whether it's good or bad. I've always defended this suit. I think it's really creative, and it looks like something a teenager could make for the most part. The textures are quite rubbery, but I think it works better for this suit than the classic spandex. I really like the kind of skeleton-like spider, and the way the suit is damaged is permanent, unlike its predecessors. My only real issue is the color of the lenses. I like that they were made using sunglasses, but in some lighting, they look like a really ugly shade of yellow. There was concept art of them being blue, which I think would have been a bit better, but I think them being silver would have been the best in my opinion. I would also like to mention that this is the best Stan Lee cameo in any movie, and that is not an opinion, that is a fact. Third act, the scene with the cranes, is really great. It shows how the first person Peter saved and paid back the favour to him, and saved him when he needed it the most. It also shows the city at large warming up for the friendly neighbourhood hero. I would also like to mention how incredible the score by James Horner is in this scene. He did an excellent job with this soundtrack, and it's definitely one of my favourite themes for Spider-Man. Alright, so here's some of the stuff that I didn't like about the movie. So to start off, in the scene where Peter gets bitten by the spider, he just kind of walked into a room full of spiders. I would change this, because in my version, Peter looks into the room and walks away because that is the creepiest shit ever. But one of the spiders would escape and bite him. That's how I would have done it. Another thing I really would have liked to see more of is Dr. Connor's family. In the comics, they're a big part of his character and made him more of a sympathetic villain. But I know there was a lot of scenes with them, but it was caught up by Sony so that he could just be big, scary lizard. I would have loved to see them in here. I also wish Kurt was built up more in general before he became the lizard, because they could have done something really interesting with him, but I think his character was a little bit rushed. I also thought the color grading in some scenes was a bit too grey and plain looking. It's also interesting to me how the movie was filmed for 3D, which might have also affected it, but also might have been because they were trying to make it look realistic. The lizard's design isn't really the best. He kind of just looks like a Goomba from the Mario movie. In the original comics of the 60s, the lizard had a more flat face, and they were trying to emulate that, but it really doesn't work in live action. I understand that it would have been harder to show emotions with the snout, but I feel like they would have been able to pull it off. And the yellow, I already said that. Why do I have this written down again? Weird. I'm terrible at making notes. Overall, this movie is really great. No matter what any critics will tell you, please do go and watch this with an open mind if you haven't in a while. So I'm going to give The Amazing Spider-Man a score of 86%. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a rushed, half-baked movie with a lot of studio interference and too many things happening at one time. So here's my take. The film's design, both visually and audibly, is incredible. The Spider-Man costume is the best one we've seen on screen to date. The score by Hans Zimmer is super, and the theme for Spidey in this movie is excellent. Definitely one of my favorites. Maybe even my favorite. The CGI in this movie is some of the best I've ever seen, not to mention the beautiful cinematography. Again, the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone is top tier. Most of their scenes together were really great in this movie. Dane DeHaan was a really good Harry Osborn, and I thought his scenes with Andrew Garfield where they were friends were really good. Andrew Garfield is definitely my favourite Spider-Man to date. I have a whole video on that if you want to check it out, but it'll be linked in the description. And his performance here was great. Some of the Spider-Man fighting street crime scenes was like the stuff with the little kid's wind turbine was excellent, and swinging was absolutely amazing, pun intended. The plot of Gwen moving off to Oxford was really interesting, and the scene where Peter wrote "I love you" on the bridge was so great and made Gwen's death so much more painful. Gwen Stacy's death scene in this movie was incredible. Even on my, it has to be a billionth rewatch, I was really worried watching her fall, and I almost cried when she hit the ground. This is not a joke, my eyes were genuinely watering. This was the saddest any movie has made me feel in a while, and it's not even that great. Not the saddest I have felt in a movie, but it's up there. I'm being honest here. The relationship between the relationship with Peter and her was great in the two films, and it was so sad that it had to end like this. Most of the comedy and jokes in this movie landed excellently. We have no chimney scenes with Aunt May.
What happened to your face? It's filthy.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I was cleaning the chimney.
We have no chimney.
What?
And the scene where Peter distracts the guards so Gwen can get out of Oscorp.
Oh God! I'm so damn it! I just spilled a hot latte all over your. I didn't do that. Oh, and you too. I'm sorry. Stay right there. Sir? Just stay right there. Wait. Hey, stop! All right, on your way. I'm sorry. I'm all thumbs today.
Was really funny. The scene in this movie where Peter and Aunt May, where she tells him about everything with his father that she knows, was really good. You could really feel the emotions of a mother figure who wants to protect her son, and for phoning in this performance, Sally Field does an amazing job in this film, and so does Andrew Garfield. And for the stuff I didn't like, because, can't all be good, it's The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Peter and Gwen's constant will they won't they style relationship drama isn't that great, and it kind of feels like some stuff off of the CW. The way he essentially stalks her in some scenes is really weird. Paul Giamatti as the Rhino is really goofy and doesn't really fit too well into the movie. I also thought the second act was pretty boring compared to the first and third, and it really dragged the movie down. For me, a big issue with the film is Peter's father. The arc with Peter Parker's parents. Fuck. For me, a big issue with this movie is Peter's father. The arc with Peter's parents was essentially wrapped up in the first film, and having it here was very poorly done in my opinion. I also hated, with every ounce in my body, I hated the decision to make Richard Parker's DNA part of the Spiders, so that only Peter could have been Spider-Man. I think this completely misunderstands the character of Spider-Man, and the most appealing part is that anyone can be under that mask. It doesn't matter about your race, gender, sexuality, or anything else. You can be Spider-Man. But the plotline like this is a terrible inclusion to the movie and completely takes away from the character. I didn't mind Electro in this film, but he wasn't great. I thought Jamie Foxx's acting as Max Dillon was way, way too goofy at times. Electro's design was pretty good, but I do definitely prefer the new one for his return this December. And I really didn't like how he was treated as an insane person. I think if done a bit differently, like they did in Troy Boy 17's Rewrite, which is a really good video, I do really recommend checking that out. He could have been a really good sympathetic villain and a good representation of mental health issues, but instead they did portray him like he's crazy, which I was not a big fan of. The suit he gets in the third act wasn't bad, but I didn't really like it. It was kind of plain and practical looking, but then it has these tacky lightning bolts on it, and that completely throws off the look of the suit. Not Harry Osborn, but the Green Goblin was not very good. He felt rushed and forced in at the end, and his design was honestly just really ugly. He looked like a meth addict. I really did not like that. The suit looked like literal trash. It genuinely did look like you would find it in a bin. And he looked less like a goblin and more like just terrible. Also, during the Goblin's first confrontation with Peter, he says, "Peter, when you said no, you meant Spider-Man said no," which completely contradicts what we saw in earlier, and clearly from a different cut of the film. Overall, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a really mixed bag, but when it's good, it is great, and when it's bad, sometimes it's so bad it's good, but sometimes it's just so bad it's really bad. Watching this is definitely a guilty pleasure for me, so I'm going to give The Amazing Spider-Man 2 a score of 68%.